This is Football at 4.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash. Your Football at 4 on a Friday edition. And a tradition unlike any other is when Adam Caplan comes on and the Eagles injury report drops simultaneously. And as we'll get into Adam now, the injury report, no surprises. That's the good news. So what can we expect for the game on Sunday? Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Of course, the Inside the Birds podcast. Like, download, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And also don't forget about Inside the Birds on YouTube and, of course, the Patreon with all the great insights. Adam, how you doing on this Friday?
Josh, I'm well. I hope you're well. Yeah, so I don't know how many years I've been on with you and Mike Gill, but during the regular season, I'm always the one who has Fridays hit. And if the Eagles are playing on Friday, I would say from 3:55 to 4:03 Eastern, of course, the injury report from the Eagles comes out. They never change, Josh. They never do for whatever reason. They were done practice at like 2:30, but they have to make us wait. It's a running joke. But anyway, so yeah, every player on the 53-man roster is available. Byron Young, who's the player that claimed off waivers, a third-round defensive tackle. He will not play, though he's practicing. He's still on the injured reserve list with designation to return, so he's not going to be able to play. They're not going to clear him for this game, but everyone's going to be available. Even Dallas Goedert got some work in. As Jeff Mosher and I talked about today, and we try to bring people inside what happens with illnesses. Any player who's got an illness cannot be in the building. They send them home. You don't want to get any other players. You don't want to get any players sick or the coach is sick. And then once they think they're ready to come back, they come back. They get checked out by the docs, and they either get cleared for practice, or if they don't, they're in the meetings and so forth. So the good thing is Goddard got some work in today, number 88, so he's been cleared to play, and that's it. And the Rams, talking to them, they're not done. They're done practice about an hour and a half. So of course they're in West Coast time. They're going to, by the way, they're going to fly in on Saturday. That's their plan. But the big story, Josh, into this game, and it hasn't been a big story for a long time, is the forecast has changed, Josh. When Jeff and I dropped our show this morning, when we recorded it, the forecast changed like literally within an hour after we dropped it. So now, unless it changes again, more or less, it looks like right now, and I'm crazy for the weather for people who follow us. So right now, it looks like from 3 to 6 Eastern, there could be up to unless it changes, 3 inches of snow, and it will not stop based on the latest hour-by-hour forecast.
So, again, no injuries in the injury report, but we do have the concern about the weather for this game. Yeah. How does meteorologist Adam Caplan anticipate the weather impacting said game?
Yeah, right. So, because of, I feel confident now finally that this actually might happen, I actually called a coach who was on the Lions sideline for the 2013 game, the snow game, which Jeff and I were at, where the snow was not on the radar until, I'm going to say, an hour and 15 before the game, maybe less. Actually, maybe less than that. We don't know exactly the hour or the minute that it snowed, but the Lions were not prepared for the snow because it was not in the forecast. There was nothing on the forecast about it. It was just called weather. So I called this coach today, and I said, hey, what do you remember about that game? He goes, well, first of all, we went in for our pregame warm-up at, he said maybe after it was done, maybe after the pregame warm-up, maybe it was 11:30, the inactives came out. They went in to the locker room, maybe it was 11:45 a.m. for a 1 o'clock game, and then when they came out at 12:30, it was snowing, Josh, like crazy, and they just were shocked. Teams like never get this wrong, by the way, Josh. It's because it was not on the radar. It just came out of the blue. So what happened was the linemen, Josh, they did not have long sleeves. And look, cold weather, you guys, what happens is this coach said they didn't have the long sleeves, but they had the Vaseline because it was cold. And what happens with Vaseline is, if a defensive lineman tries to hold you, their hands move. They can't get a grab. They can't grab you. But they just were not dressed warm enough. Now, they did have 2 pairs of cleats, and I don't know why the coach said that. I should follow up, but he said they had cleats, but they had to go back into the locker room and change the cleats, but they weren't quite good enough because they didn't realize how heavy the snow would be. Not that they knew it was going to snow, but the cleats that they had the studs were not good enough. So they had problems. But the big problem that they had was on defense. The defensive linemen could not get footing, and against Shady McCoy, as this coach said, their lineman never had a chance, and Shady obviously was great in that game. We were there, so I remember it like just being blown away by it. And I'm someone who loves a lot of snow. I hate when we get like a quarter of an inch, Josh, as you and I have got to know each other. I think you probably know that I don't want this eighth of an inch stuff. Like, don't snow then. If you're going to snow like a half a foot, you know? Because, look, my wife and I purchased a snowblower many years ago. I don't think we've used it for 3 years. In fact, we got to crank it up to make sure it works. We'll have to do that over the weekend. But right now, again, unless it changes, look, it would be interesting if it didn't snow because that's not really what's supposed to happen. But the latest forecast, and I always look at hour by hour, it's going to snow. Now, about far as passing the ball, this coach said that, listen, you absolutely could pass it. If it's not windy, he goes, you're going to have certain run plays in where you think you'll have an advantage against the defense because they might not be able to get the footing. But he goes, it's not hard to throw. In fact, he prefers throwing way more in the snow than he does in the rain because of the slippery ball. It's really hard to throw in rain.
By the way, I can confirm my snowblower works. I had to use it a couple weeks ago, so I can confirm.
It looks. Now you've told me, like in South Jersey, I'm near King of Prussia. If you want to know, just to give you an idea, for those of you who know the area, and you're in South Jersey, so I don't know sometimes like we don't get the snow you guys get,
right?
But we'll see what happens. And look, remember, it's a 3:00 game, folks. Right now, by the way, it's supposed to start snowing at 1. Not that it matters at all before the game. It only matters what happens in the game. But it is, for someone who's been to the link probably 500 times in my career, that's a little bit of exaggeration, but probably a couple hundred times, I know what it's like to drive in bad weather coming in there, man. People drive slow, so make sure you leave early.
Adam Caplan, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, at Caplan NFL on the Twitter X platform. So you mentioned Shady McCoy, so that kind of leans into game plan. Do we expect the current running back, SaquonBarkley, to be a heavy part of the Eagles' game plan on Sunday like he was in the first matchup?
Josh, their game plan has been, save for 3 or 4 games, super run heavy. It's kind of, look, I think someone put it on our YouTube board, and I thought it was great. I didn't even think of that. But, for many decades, other than some years when the Steelers were throwing a lot with Ben Roethlisberger, the game plan under Bill Cowher, for the most part, was run the ball with Joe Bettis, we with defense, limit the dropbacks for the quarterback. That's what they're doing with JalenHurts. And by the way, they're winning with it. We could argue, why wouldn't they throw the ball more because of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but they're taking the approach, Josh, that this is the best way to win. So the over-under total for SaquonBarkley is around 130 yards. I actually like the over, which is a lot, but it's going to start with SaquonBarkley, and I feel strongly he's going to hit that. So we'll see what happens. By the way, the line is still 6. Now the over-under has dropped a little bit, but, I expect heavy run. Now, with the Rams, Josh, Kyron Williams is a nice back, but he's not explosive. He's more of a stop-and-start vision runner. Their offense does start with a run, though. Everybody talks about Matthew Stafford. Ironically, who was the quarterback for the Lions in 2013 with the snow game? Matthew Stafford. It's funny how things happen, and here's another snow game for Matthew Stafford.
By the way, Kyron Williams had one of his fumbles this year versus the Eagles when they played the first time.
And that changed the course of the game, Josh. They were about to score, and he fumbled, and you saw him sulk on the sidelines.
Yep.
And let me tell you something. In snow, man, your hands could get wet. You better have the right gloves for that game. And the good thing is, Josh, because this is not going to be a surprise to anyone, both teams will be able to prepare for it, and they'll adjust accordingly. They'll have the right gear on too. That this coach told me today, like, you better have the right gear for snow. It's different than rain. Again, the ball's extremely slippery. It's very hard to throw. I mentioned today's show, the only quarterback I've ever seen throw well in the rain is Rich Gannon, who was with the Raiders, and I've never seen. Now, what they did is they didn't throw it deep, no more than 15 yards. Dink, dunk, dink, dunk, dink, dunk, and he just matriculated the ball downfield, and he was great. But it's really not hard to. And by the way, the wind will be moderate. It won't be too bad. So we'll see. And obviously, we know about A.J. Brown, who will definitely play with that left knee issue. Josh, we have no idea how well he can run at this point. He didn't look great last week in the game.
No, he didn't. He looked like he was laboring at times going up and down the field. Adam, you mentioned Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams of the Rams offense. Well, what about the game plan for the Eagles defense? No Nakobe Dean. He is out. So we heard Fangio mention Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. earlier this week. So what are the expectations for the Eagles defensive game plan?
Yeah, so there are two ways to do it. Trotter's definitely going to play. I mean, Vic put that out there. When Vic says something, it's going to happen. No, Greg Cosell dropped something really interesting, which we were not aware of. Greg said that in his pre-draft study of Dean and Trotter is way better in coverage. In fact, he said that Trotter is really good at coverage in college. Now, we know that Zach Ball will be a nickel linebacker. Who will be the other one? And if they want to play if they play dime with a dime linebacker, it most likely be Bond. So who will be the other linebacker? That's something that Vic's going to have to decide. Now, if you play a base defense, or if you just want to have two linebackers in, who's the other linebacker for more often than not? Probably going to be Burks because of the experience and his size. But I'll tell you what, I don't think he moved all that well last week. Trot Jr., as people with Patreon know, we've been talking about Trotter for a couple months now, how great he's looked behind the scenes. He's probably a little bit farther ahead than the Eagles anticipated. He wasn't supposed to play this season, and, certain things have happened. I'm interested to see how they do this. Look, typically you don't rotate. What you do is you might do it by series. You don't do it usually in series. Or situationally, you might say, okay, this guy's our base linebacker, this guy's their nickel, like Pittsburgh does. But we don't know. I mean, you could point to the Dallas game, which is sort of because they were able to kind of try out both players because the game meant nothing to them. But you can't say that's definitely going to happen. I mean, you have that example. That's not a lot that's going to happen.
Right.
Because what happens is you go through the tape of that game, and you go through practice, too. Practice means everything, by the way. You try it out, and you see what they look like in practice. And then what you do is you take the practice tape, and you see how they handle the game plan. And if they don't look right, you change it up again. So what's going to come here for the Rams is very simple. It starts with Kyron Williams. He's not Barkley as an explosive player, but he's shifty, and the guy's very productive, and he's also good in the pass game. Now, the Eagles' defense, who, by the way, in that game, that Rams game, that first game, Brandon Graham, who got hurt in that game, was absolutely unstoppable in that game. And by the way, Milton Williams also had 2 sacks. He's been phenomenal. If I was a Pro Bowl voter, I would have voted, I could tell you, for Milton Williams. We don't talk about him enough, Josh. I'm telling you, we just don't talk. He's a phenomenal football player.
Adam, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you really quick. I know that the Rams are a little more banged up than the Eagles are this time of year, so give the audience some insight into what is going on with Witherspoon and Brown. I know McVay said Higbee should be good to go after his hospital stint.
Yeah, it's crazy. So he had a chest contusion. The reason why I went to the hospital is because he had bleeding, and you're always worried about what that can be because it could be a lung contusion. Well, this case, it was a chest contusion, so he's clear to play. The only player they have a mild concern about, I was told this morning, was Akilla Witherspoon, who's one of their starting outside corners. Akilla Witherspoon is kind of a journeyman corner, started in the Super Bowl many years ago with the 49ers, kind of bounced around with Seattle, Pittsburgh, now his second year with the Rams. And with Witherspoon, because he had a hamstring injury, to start, because remember, they're on a short week. They didn't get home until early Tuesday morning. They weren't totally sure, but they thought his treatment went well. He was supposed to practice today. Now, they just started practice about 15 minutes ago, so we're not going to know for sure. But we'll update on the pregame show for Inside the Birds. And by the way, we're going to drop the pregame show early because we know some people have told us, because when we drop it Sunday morning, people already have left for the game. So we're going to do everyone a solid. We're going to drop that. Patreon people get it tonight, and the rest of the public will get it tomorrow morning. So if you're a Patreon member, we had an unbelievable live chat last night, an hour and 20 minutes, where we gave a lot of information. And then go to patreon.com/InsideTheBirds to sign up. Get Greg Cosell, get John D. Filippo, the former Eagles quarterbacks coach, has been with us, and other surprises coming on here. But if you just want to subscribe to our regular show, go to YouTube, as you mentioned, Josh, earlier. By the way, we had a great interview with Ross Tucker, who does Eagles preseason and also does radio for Westwood One. He had a phenomenal story about he called this game as a color analyst for CBS then. Remember that crazy Patriots-Titans game where Tom Brady had 6 touchdowns in the first half because the Titans didn't have the right cleats. You got to hear that story. It's already available if you want to go to any of our podcasting platforms or YouTube.
Love it, love it. Adam Caplan joined us here at Caplan NFL and Twitter X platform. Inside the Birds every day brings you football at 4. Adam, great stuff. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks.